I'm going to start here. Angel Reese wants credit. She's not getting enough credit. She did this too. She taunted Caitlin Clark. She made this whole thing. The reason why WNBA is up is because of Angel Reese.
Did you see what Jason Whitlock just said about Angel Reese? He didn't just disagree with her, he completely exposed the financial delusion behind her demands for more money, while Reese and Carrington are threatening to sit out if they don't get paid more. They're ignoring one massive problem.
Dude, I went from liking Angel Reese a little bit to now I don't like Angel Reese. I'm back to like, she's just bad news.
The WNBA is losing $30 million every year. That's right, the league, these players are demanding more money from his hemorrhaging cash, and Whitlock just called out their entire strategy, saying they're playing checkers in a game of chess is the most out-of-touch demand in sports history.
And, you know, she's fallen right in line with the rest of the WNBA. She's just an angry feminist.
You think Angel Reese's demands are reasonable? Wait until you hear what Jason Whitlock just said about the WNBA's financial situation. While Reese and her fellow players are out there demanding bigger contracts and more money, Whitlock dropped a financial bomb that completely shatters their argument. He didn't just disagree with Reese, he exposed the uncomfortable truth that most basketball fans don't realize about women's professional basketball.
They have a sit-down on Angel Reese's podcast and start talking about the money they want and what the WNBA is planning if the players don't get their money.
When Angel Reese sits on her podcast talking about how WNBA players deserve more, Whitlock points to a harsh reality. The league has been hemorrhaging money for years. We're not talking about small losses either. The WNBA is losing approximately $30 million every single year. Let that sink in for a moment. A league that's bleeding cash at that rate is somehow facing players demanding bigger paychecks.
This kind of talk, and they're not talking about this season, they're talking about next season, their collective bargaining agreement. This is a league that averages losing $25-30 million a year.
Whitlock didn't pull any punches in his assessment. He basically said these players are showing unprecedented levels of entitlement while competing in a league that can't even financially support itself. The most brutal part, Whitlock suggested that instead of demanding more money, these athletes should actually be paying to play given the dire financial circumstances of the WNBA. Can you imagine any other professional athlete being told they should pay for the privilege of playing? That's how bad Whitlock thinks the situation is.
And these women are talking about, if we don't get what we want, if we don't get what we deserve, if you got what you deserve, you'd be paying to play in the WNBA.
What makes Whitlock's critique so powerful is how he frames a fundamental disconnect between what these players believe they're worth versus the harsh business reality. While Rhea and others talk about their value and leverage, Whitlock points to that 25 to 30 million annual loss figure as the only number that truly matters in this conversation. In his view, how can you demand a bigger slice of a pie that doesn't even exist?
NBA, but to be fair, and you're right about that, silence is golden, and sometimes less is more when it comes to players talking and using their platform and getting out their message.
Things got even more interesting when Whitlock addressed Reese's specific threat to sit out games if their salary demands weren't met. You know how he responded? He basically dared her to follow through because he knows it would have zero impact on the league's success or viewership.
I wonder, though, if the average WNBA player, none of us knows, is actually saying, hey, Angel, would you shut the f*** up? Seriously. Because this does not help the perception of the league.
Whitlock's dismissive reaction isn't just about calling Reese's bluff. It's pointing to a straight icy disaster happening in real time. The overexposure of today's athletes through constant social media presence and endless podcasts is fundamentally changing how fans view them. And not in a good way, according to Whitlock. We're watching these WNBA stars sabotage themselves tweet by tweet and podcast by podcast.
You know, Steve, when I watch that video, one of the main thoughts that goes through my head is just like overexposure.
Have you noticed how practically every player has a microphone in their face these days? Whitlock directly called this out, saying everybody's got a podcast, everybody is getting interviewed non-stop, everybody's putting themselves out there, and they don't understand they are harming themselves. It's like they are willingly removing the mystique that once made sports stars special.
Just overexposure. Everybody's got a podcast, everybody is getting interviewed nonstop. Everybody's putting themselves out there, and they don't understand they're harming themselves.
When Whitlock says Angel Reese is playing checkers in a game of chess, is highlighting a fundamental strategic error. These players are broadcasting every thought grievance and demand a world without considering the consequences.
That we're getting too much exposure to Angel Reese and Dejanay Carrington and the rest of these players. And so athletes from previous generations that didn't have podcasts, didn't have social media.
Think about it. In previous generations, we barely knew anything about our favorite athletes beyond their performance on the court. Michael wasn't giving daily updates about his contract negotiations or posting his thoughts on league policies.
They had the advantage of
We didn't know much about them. We didn't know how greedy, entitled, stupid, what we didn't know.
because they weren't overexposed.
Teen. Did you hear that? Whitlock made that exact point explaining that athletes from previous eras benefited because we didn't know how greedy, entitled, stupid they weren't overexposed. When today's players constantly appear on podcasts and social media, they're revealing sides of themselves that fans might not want to see: the entitlement, the lack of strategic thinking, the short-sightedness.
These guys are overexposed and they're playing a game of checkers in a game of chess.
Podcast conversation between Reese and Carrington is the perfect example of this problem. By publicly discussing strike plans and salary demands, they are showing their hand to everyone, including league executives and fans who might not be sympathetic to their cause. What's more, they are potentially creating division within their own ranks.
Anyway, this is just a bad look for the WNBA. Angel Reese just wants content for her podcast. She's playing checkers in a game of chess.
Can you imagine what other WNBA players might be thinking right now? Whitlock certainly has, suggesting many of them are probably thinking, Angel, would you shut up every time Reese speaks out about these issues? She's potentially hurting the league's image and making it harder for all players to gain public support for better conditions.
But to be fair to the rest of that league, I wonder how many other women are thinking, hey, Angel, be quiet. Be quiet. You make a lot of other money doing other things. We actually like this job and need this job. We're all working for a vision. Don't ruin it for the rest of us.
Speaking of players who might be thinking, Angel, would you shut up? There's a glaring omission in Reese and Carrington's entire leverage discussion that Whitlock immediately zeroed in on. How can you talk about WNBA player value for an entire podcast without once mentioning the name Caitlin?
And if I'm an average, everyday WNBA player who appreciates what we have, I'm thinking, would you just be quiet? Seriously.
Whitlock didn't let this calculated silence slide, pointing out that the two players most publicly antagonistic toward Clark somehow managed to have a full conversation about league leverage while completely avoiding the elephant in the room, the very player driving unprecedented interest in women's basketball.
It's funny that the two people having this conversation are two people that absolutely hate Caitlin Clark and are jealous of Caitlin Clark.
You see, Whitlock didn't just call out this omission. He hammered home what it reveals about Reese and Carrington's real agenda. It's no coincidence. He explained that the two players most hostile toward Caitlin Clark are the ones plotting a work stoppage while Rhea is out there demanding more money, and threatening strike Clark is quietly putting in the work, letting her game speak for itself. The stark contrast wasn't lost on Whitlock, who praised Clark's approach while criticizing Reese's constant need for attention.
And couldn't think to say during this entire deal, like, because of the leverage that Caitlin Clark has given us, we may actually get paid more than what we deserve.
But Whitlock didn't just make claims, he backed them up with hard numbers that don't lie. Have you seen the attendance figures of WNBA games with Clark versus games? Without her, the difference is staggering. Indiana Fever games are selling out arenas nationwide with ticket prices soaring to levels never before seen in the WNBA. When Clark plays, viewership spikes dramatically, sometimes tripling or quadrupling normal figures. Meanwhile, games without her often return to the leagues historically modest audience numbers.
Because it's all Caitlin Clark, but instead you have two very delusional people. Oh, we deserve this. We blah, blah, blah.
We?
Whitlock didn't mince words about what this means. 90% of the renewed interest in the WNBA is based around one singular player, Caitlin Clark. He argued that Clark's arrival has single-handedly transformed the league's visibility and marketability, yet Reese and Carrington refused to acknowledge the source of their newfound leverage. Instead, they are effectively riding Clark's coattails while simultaneously refusing to give her credit.
What did they lose? I think $29 million last year. They're saying they lost.
Well, that's an improvement.
Maybe it's 50. Well, yeah, maybe it was 50 million. It's been 29 straight years of losing.
Now, what do you think would happen to the WNBA if Clark wasn't part of the picture? Whitlock laid out this brutal truth that strips away any illusion about where the power really lies. Without Clark driving viewership, attendance, and media coverage, there would be absolutely no leverage for Reese or anyone else to demand higher salary. The league would simply return to its pre-Clark financial struggles, making Reese's threats completely hollow.
We haven't heard anything from Caitlin. She's just gotten to work. just gotten to work in the offseason.
Yeah, she can actually let her play on the court run her mouth for her.
Whitlock's warning about what happens if WNBA players go on strike should terrify Angel Reese and anyone else threatening work stoppages. Unlike established sports leagues with decades of fan loyalty, the WNBA is walking on thin ice with its newfound momentum. Whitlock flat out says that work stoppages will irritate fans and there will be lasting impact from that. Is not just speculating, has seen this movie before.
And I'm telling you, they do have obvious leverage because of Caitlin Clark and because of the momentum that women's basketball does have.
Remember the 1994 pound strike? That disaster nearly killed baseball's popularity overnight. The sport had to rely on the steroid-fueled home run race between Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa to win fans back. But here's the crucial difference. Whitlock points out baseball had generations of deeply embedded cultural relevance to fall back on. The WNBA doesn't have that luxury. They've had mere months of genuine mainstream momentum, primarily thanks to one rookie.